Daniel Reed pressed his palm against the identification scanner and waited. The heavy doors of Celestial Academy slid open with a soft hiss. Behind him, Atlas sat perfectly still, his brown eyes watching everything with calm attention. The German shepherd had traveled across 3-star systems to reach this place, and he looked as composed as ever. "Next student, please approach the registration desk," a mechanical voice announced through the vast entrance hall. Daniel walked forward, his boots echoing on the polished floor. Atlas followed at his left side, matching his pace exactly. Around them, students from dozens of different worlds moved in clusters. Some had scales that shimmered under the artificial lights. Others floated a few inches above the ground, their bodies glowing with soft blue energy. A group of insect-like beings clicked and chirped to each other near a holographic directory. This was Daniel's second year at the academy, but it felt like the first all over again. Last year he had come alone. This year everything changed when his doctor approved Atlas as a certified companion for his anxiety. The dog had been with him since he was 15, through the hardest years of his life. Leaving Atlas on Earth was not an option anymore. The registration officer was a tall saurian named Grethus. Her reptilian features made her expressions hard to read, but her voice carried clear disapproval, name and species. Daniel Reed, human, second-year engineering student. Grethus looked down at Atlas. "And this creature?" "This is Atlas. He's my service dog. I have all the paperwork approved by the Galactic Medical Board." Several students nearby stopped to stare. A Lumen student, her body made of pure light energy, drifted closer. "Is that an Earth animal? A real one?" "Yes," Daniel said. "He's a dog." The Lumen student laughed, a sound like wind chimes. "How primitive. Why would you bring such a thing here?" Daniel felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his voice steady. "Because I need him." Grethus scanned through her datapad, her clawed fingers moving quickly. "The paperwork appears to be in order. The Galactic Treaty requires us to honor medical accommodations from all member worlds. However, the creature must remain under your control at all times. Any incidents will result in immediate removal." "Understood. Atlas is trained. There won't be any problems. We shall see." Grethus handed him a small device. "Your room assignment is in Building 7, Level 3. Orientation begins in 2 hours." Daniel took the device and headed toward the residential area. More students stopped to watch Atlas as they passed. Some pointed. Others whispered to their companions. A few laughed openly. In the elevator, a Chitauri student stood in the corner. His insect body was covered in a hard blue shell, and 6 small drones floated around his head. Each drone was connected to his mind through thin strands of biological wire. "That animal," the Chitauri said, his mandibles clicking. "What does it do?" "He helps me," Daniel replied simply. "Helps how?" "My drones can interface with any computer system in the galaxy. They can solve mathematical equations in microseconds. They can repair damaged equipment without tools." The Chitauri's antennae twitched with what might have been amusement. "What can your animal do?" Daniel looked down at Atlas. The dog met his eyes and wagged his tail once. "He's my friend." The Chitauri made a sound that might have been laughter. "Friendship is not a function. It is sentiment. We evolved past such inefficiencies thousands of years ago." The elevator doors opened and Daniel stepped out without responding. His room was at the end of a long corridor. It was small but comfortable, with a sleeping platform, a study desk, and a viewing window that showed the stars beyond the station. Daniel set down his bags and sat on the floor. Atlas immediately came to him, pressing his solid warmth against Daniel's side. "We're going to be okay here," Daniel said quietly, scratching behind the dog's ears. "I know it's different. I know they don't understand. But we're going to be okay." Atlas licked his hand and settled down with a contented sigh. 2 hours later, Daniel and Atlas entered the main assembly hall. Thousands of students filled the vast space, arranged by species and year level. Daniel found the section for human students and sat near the back. Atlas lay down at his feet, his head resting on his paws. The academy director, a deep-born named Quellen, addressed the crowd. His aquatic body was contained in a specialized suit filled with water from his home world. His voice came through a translator that made him sound calm and wise. "Welcome to another year at Celestial Academy. Here we gather the brightest minds from across the galaxy. We learn from each other. We grow together. We prepare for a future where all species work in harmony." It was a nice speech. Daniel had heard similar words last year, But he noticed how many students kept glancing his way, their eyes fixed on Atlas. Harmony seemed like a distant dream. After the assembly, students broke into smaller groups. Daniel tried to join a discussion about advanced engineering, but the conversation died when he approached. A Saurian student with dark red scales stepped forward. His name was Rethus, and he was known as one of the top students in the physics program. "You're the human with the pet," Rethus said. "It wasn't a question. He's not a pet. He's a service animal." "There's a difference?" Rethus smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. "On my world, we abandoned such primitive relationships 10,000 years ago. We engineered our companions to be useful, intelligent, superior in every way." A small creature perched on Rethus's shoulder. It looked like a miniature version of Rethus himself, with bright red scales and alert golden eyes. "This is Stryker. He can process complex calculations faster than most computers. He can predict weather patterns. He can analyze chemical compounds with a single taste. What can your animal do?" Daniel looked at Rethus, then at the small creature, then back at Atlas. His dog was watching him, waiting patiently, trusting completely. "He loves me," Daniel said simply. Several students laughed. Rethus's smile widened. "Love, how very human. How very inefficient. Perhaps you will teach us about love in one of your classes. Right after we teach you about evolution and progress." The group walked away, their laughter following them down the corridor. Daniel stood alone with Atlas in the emptying hall. He knelt down and wrapped his arms around the dog's neck. "They don't understand," he whispered. "They don't know what you mean to me. What you've done for me. They just see something to mock." Atlas pressed closer and licked Daniel's cheek. In that moment, it didn't matter what anyone else thought. It didn't matter if they laughed or questioned or dismissed the bond they shared. Atlas was here. That was enough. But as Daniel walked back to his room, he couldn't shake the feeling that the real challenges were just beginning. The whole academy seemed determined to prove that Earth animals were worthless, that humans were foolish for keeping them. That evolution meant leaving such things behind. Daniel didn't know how to explain what Atlas meant to him in terms these students would understand. He didn't know how to measure love or loyalty or companionship on their scales of efficiency and function. He only knew one thing for certain. Atlas had saved his life more times than he could count, not through advanced technology or engineered intelligence. Just by being there, just by caring, maybe that would be enough. Or maybe they would spend the whole year fighting a battle they couldn't win. Time would tell. 3 weeks passed, and the mockery only grew worse. Daniel sat in xenobiology class, trying to focus on Professor Kelvin's lecture about genetic adaptation across different planetary environments. Atlas lay quietly under his desk, invisible to most of the class. But Daniel could feel the stares. He could hear the whispers. "Can you believe he brings that thing everywhere? I heard it can't even understand complex commands. My energy construct can reconfigure itself into 20 different forms. His animal just sits there." Professor Kelvin, a deep-born with patience that seemed endless, tried to redirect the class's attention. "Today we'll examine how different species developed companionship bonds. Some species engineered artificial intelligence, others created biological servants, and some, like humans, formed relationships with other natural creatures. Each method has merit." A Lumen student named Arya raised her hand. Her glowing form brightened with what might have been excitement. "Professor, surely you're not suggesting that keeping primitive animals is equal to our advanced methods? That's like comparing stone tools to quantum computers." Professor Kelvin's translator carried a note of gentle correction. "I'm suggesting that we should examine all approaches before judging them." "Daniel, perhaps you would like to share some information about Earth's relationship with animals." Daniel felt every eye in the room turn toward him. His hands started to sweat. Atlas sensed his anxiety and pressed his head against Daniel's leg, a steady reminder that he wasn't alone. "Humans have lived with dogs for over 30,000 years, Daniel began. "We didn't engineer them. We didn't build them. We found each other. Wolves started following human camps, and over generations we formed a bond. They helped us hunt. We gave them food and shelter. Eventually they became dogs. They became family." Rethus, sitting in the front row with Stryker on his shoulder, laughed loudly. "You're describing parasitism. The animals took your resources and gave minimal return. My Stryker was designed with specific genetic improvements, enhanced intelligence, superior sensory systems, calculated obedience. Your animal evolved by accident. Not by accident, Daniel said, his voice stronger now. By choice. By mutual benefit. By trust. Trust. Rethus made the word sound like an insult. Another inefficient emotion. Stryker doesn't need trust. He's programmed to perform. That's superior. Professor Kelvin tried to interrupt, but Arya spoke first. I'd like to demonstrate something, if I may. She floated to the front of the class and her body shifted. The glowing energy that formed her shape began to change, creating different structures. First a perfect sphere, then a cube, then a complex geometric pattern that hurt to look at directly. My construct can become anything I need. A tool, a weapon, a shield, a light source. What form can your animal take, Daniel? He doesn't change forms, Daniel admitted. He's just Atlas. The class erupted in laughter. Even Professor Kelvin seemed at a loss for how to continue the discussion. Daniel felt his face burning. He wanted to explain that Atlas didn't need to change forms because he was perfect as he was. That loyalty and love didn't need enhancement. But the words wouldn't come. After class, Daniel hurried toward the exit, but Rethus blocked his path. Several other students gathered around, forming a loose circle. A Chitauri named Vesper floated forward, his drone circling overhead. We've been talking, Rethus said, his red scales catching the light. Your presence here with that animal is embarrassing. You make humans look backward. Primitive. You make our entire species group look bad. Atlas has every right to be here, Daniel replied. The Academy approved him, only because of some treaty obligation. Vesper's mandibles clicked rapidly. But approval doesn't mean acceptance. My drones can hack into any security system on this station. They can translate 4,000 languages simultaneously. They can manufacture microtools from base materials. Your animal can do none of these things. He doesn't need to do those things. Then what use is he? Rethus leaned closer, his golden eyes narrowed. Prove it. Prove that your Earth animal has any value compared to our companions. Or admit the truth. That you're clinging to an evolutionary dead end out of sentiment and stubbornness. Daniel felt trapped. He looked down at Atlas, who gazed back with absolute trust. The dog didn't understand the words being said, but he understood that Daniel was upset. His tail gave a small, uncertain wag, as if asking what he could do to help. I don't need to prove anything to you, Daniel said quietly. Because you can't. Rethus straightened up, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd. I propose a formal challenge. The Academy holds companionship trials every semester. A series of tests measuring intelligence, utility, and bonding strength. Let your animal compete against real companions. When he fails, you'll publicly acknowledge that Earth's approach to animals is inferior. You'll admit that humanity needs to evolve past such primitive attachments. And if Atlas succeeds? The question came from behind the crowd. A human girl pushed through, her dark hair tied back in a practical braid. Her name was Rebecca, one of the few other human students at the Academy. Daniel had seen her around but never spoken to her. Rethus turned to Rebecca with an amused expression. If the impossible happens and the animal somehow succeeds, then I will issue a formal apology. I will attend any seminar on Earth animals that Daniel wishes to organize. I will acknowledge that perhaps we judged too quickly. He paused. But we both know that won't happen. Rebecca looked at Daniel. Don't let them bully you into this. But Daniel felt something shifting inside him. He was tired of the mockery, tired of defending Atlas without being able to show what made him special, tired of watching other students parade their advanced companions while treating Atlas like a joke. I accept, Daniel said. Atlas will compete in the trials. The crowd murmured with surprise and excitement. Rethus's smile widened. Excellent. The trials are in 2 weeks. That should give you plenty of time to train your animal in things he cannot possibly learn. The crowd dispersed, already spreading the news across the station's network. Within an hour, every student at Celestial Academy knew about the challenge. Within 2 hours, it was the most talked about event of the semester. Daniel sat in his room with Rebecca and Atlas. His hands were shaking slightly as he pulled up information about past companionship trials on his datapad. This was a mistake, he said, scrolling through competition footage. Look at these tests. Holographic puzzles, system hacking challenges, complex problem solving. Atlas can't do any of this, then why did you accept? Rebecca asked gently. Because I'm tired of them looking at him like he's worthless. Like our bond means nothing. Daniel set down the datapad and buried his face in his hands. But maybe they're right. Maybe Atlas can't compete with engineered intelligence and energy constructs. Maybe I'm asking too much of him. Rebecca moved to sit on the floor next to him. Atlas, sensing the distress, pushed his way between them and rested his head on Daniel's knee. "Look at him," Rebecca said softly. "Really look at him. He knows you're upset. He's trying to comfort you. Can Rethus's striker do that? Can Arya's construct sense emotion? Can Vesper's drones care? Caring isn't a measurable skill in the trials. Maybe it should be." Rebecca scratched Atlas behind his ears and the dog's tail began to wag. "I had a cat back on Earth. His name was Oliver. He was old and slow and he couldn't do anything impressive. But when my mom died, he stayed with me every night for months. He'd sleep on my chest and purr, and somehow that helped more than any therapy or medication. I left him with my dad when I came here because I was afraid of exactly this. Afraid people would mock him. Mock me for loving him." She looked at Daniel with fierce determination. "Don't let them make you ashamed of Atlas. Don't let them turn love into a weakness." Daniel felt something settle in his chest. Rebecca was right. The trials would measure things that Atlas might not excel at, but they couldn't measure what really mattered. They couldn't measure the nights Atlas had laid beside him when panic attacks made breathing impossible. They couldn't measure the times Atlas had sensed his mood and provided comfort before Daniel even knew he needed it. They couldn't measure 15,000 years of evolutionary bond between humans and dogs. "Will you help me?" Daniel asked. "Help me train him?" Rebecca smiled. "Of course. We'll show them what Earth animals can really do." Over the next 2 weeks, Daniel and Rebecca worked with Atlas every spare moment. They couldn't teach him to interface with computers or solve quantum equations, but they could sharpen his natural abilities. His sense of smell, his intuition, his ability to read human emotion and respond appropriately. Other students would gather to watch sometimes, making jokes and taking videos. Rethus came by twice. Stryker perched on his shoulder just to observe and offer mocking commentary. "Teaching him to fetch? How primitive. My Stryker learned advanced calculus in 3 days. Your dog took 3 days to learn to stay." But Daniel ignored them. He focused on Atlas, on the quiet intelligence in those brown eyes, on the unwavering trust and loyalty that no amount of genetic engineering could replicate. The night before the trials, Daniel couldn't sleep. He sat by the window watching the stars with Atlas's warm weight pressed against his side. "Tomorrow," he whispered to the dog, "everyone will be watching, expecting you to fail, expecting me to be humiliated. But I don't care about winning anymore. I just want them to see you. Really see you. See what you are to me." Atlas yawned and licked Daniel's hand, then settled back into sleep without worry or fear. Whatever tomorrow brought, it didn't matter to him. He was with his person. That was enough. Daniel wished he could share that peace. But as he finally drifted off to sleep, his dreams were filled with flashing lights and mocking laughter and the feeling of standing alone in a vast crowd with only Atlas beside him, the competition arena filled with students long before the scheduled start time. Hundreds of beings from dozens of worlds packed the observation platforms, their voices creating a roar of anticipation. Holographic displays floated throughout the space, ready to broadcast every moment to those who couldn't attend in person. Daniel stood at the entrance to the competition floor with Atlas at his side. His stomach felt like it was tied in knots. Rebecca gave his shoulder a squeeze. "You've got this," she said. "Just trust him." "I do trust him. I'm worried about what happens when trust isn't enough." The arena coordinator, a neutral artificial intelligence with no stake in the outcome, announced the competitors through speakers that echoed across the vast space. Competing today are 16 registered companions representing 12 different species. Test will measure intelligence, problem-solving ability, adaptability, utility, and bond strength. Scoring will be calculated by an impartial panel of judges representing the Galactic Education Council. One by one, the competitors were introduced. Rethus entered with Stryker, the small engineered raptor moving with mechanical precision. Arya floated in, her energy construct shifting colors in a dazzling display. Vesper came next, his 6 drones performing synchronized movements overhead. A deep-born student brought a water-dwelling creature that could apparently predict tide patterns with perfect accuracy. A massive feline from a high-gravity world padded in, its muscles rippling under thick fur. Finally, the AI called Daniel's name. He walked onto the competition floor with Atlas. The crowd's reaction was immediate. Laughter, whispers, a few scattered boos. On the giant displays, Atlas looked small and ordinary compared to the engineered marvels and technological wonders around him. And now, the AI announced, we begin with the first test. Intelligence and problem solving. Holographic puzzles materialized in front of each companion. Complex three-dimensional mazes that shifted and changed. Mathematical equations floating in mid-air. Pattern recognition challenges that would strain most organic minds. Stryker solved his maze in 14 seconds. His enhanced brain calculating optimal paths instantly. Arya's construct flowed through the puzzle like water, adapting to each change without hesitation. The drones worked in perfect coordination, solving problems through distributed processing. Atlas sat and looked at Daniel, waiting for a command he could understand. Daniel's heart sank. The puzzle was designed for digital interfaces and advanced cognition. There was nothing here that Atlas could interact with in a meaningful way. He tried directing Atlas through simple commands, but it was clear they were falling behind, far behind. The judges marked their scores. Daniel didn't need to see the numbers to know they were low. The second test began immediately. Companions were presented with various tools and equipment, then given tasks to complete. Stryker used his claws to manipulate delicate instruments with surgical precision. The water creature created complex chemical compounds by mixing substances in its tank. Vesper's drones interfaced directly with computer systems, rewriting code in real time. Atlas watched Daniel carefully, ready to respond to any command, but most of the tasks required capabilities he simply didn't have. He couldn't interface with digital systems. He couldn't manipulate tools designed for claws or energy fields. He could fetch items when asked, could follow complex chains of commands, but nothing that impressed the judges or the crowd. More laughter rippled through the observers. Someone shouted, "Send the dog home!" Others joined in with similar jeers. Rebecca, watching from the sidelines, clenched her fists. She wanted to scream at them all, to make them understand that they were measuring the wrong things. But she stayed silent, knowing that any outburst would only make things worse for Daniel. The third test was search and retrieval. This was something Atlas could actually do. Each companion was sent into a maze-like environment to find hidden objects. The twist was that the objects were concealed using various methods, from electronic cloaking to simple physical hiding. Stryker scanned with enhanced vision, finding several items quickly. Arya's construct expanded to search multiple areas simultaneously. The drones used sensor arrays to detect anomalies. Atlas used his nose. He moved through the maze with focus, his tail held high, his head low to the ground. Daniel had hidden practice items around their room for weeks, teaching Atlas to find them by scent. Now, in the arena, the dog worked with the same determined focus. He found an object hidden under a loose panel, another concealed behind a holographic wall that projected false readings to electronic sensors, a third buried in a container that blocked most scanning methods. For the first time, the crowd quieted. Atlas was performing well, not perfectly, but competently. He found 7 out of 10 hidden items, placing him in the middle of the competitors rather than at the bottom. Daniel felt a small spark of hope. Maybe they wouldn't win, but at least they wouldn't be completely humiliated. Then the final item appeared on the challenge list, and everything changed. The AI announced a special addition to the search test. A volunteer student has been designated as a simulated intruder. All companions must identify this individual, who is concealed somewhere in the testing environment using low-technology methods. No electronic cloaking, no energy shields, simply basic camouflage and stillness. This was meant to be difficult. Most advanced companions relied on technological detection. They scanned for energy signatures, heat patterns, electronic signals. A person simply hiding with basic camouflage would be nearly invisible to their sensors. Stryker scanned the area repeatedly, his enhanced vision finding nothing unusual. Arya's construct expanded and contracted, searching for disruptions in the environment. The drones flew in grid patterns, their sensors registering only normal background readings. Atlas, however, went still. His ears perked up, his nose worked the air carefully. Then he moved, not rushing but purposeful, toward a corner of the testing area that looked completely empty. He stopped in front of what appeared to be a stack of storage containers and barked once. A sharp, clear sound that echoed through the suddenly silent arena. Behind the containers, a student emerged, wearing a camouflage suit that blended with the surroundings. The volunteer smiled sheepishly and waved at the judges. "Positive identification," the AI announced. "First successful location goes to the Earth Canine, Atlas." The crowd erupted in surprised murmurs. Rethis stood abruptly, his scales flushing darker red. That was luck, pure chance. The animal probably smelled food or something. But the judges were already marking scores. Atlas had found the hidden person through methods that the technological companions couldn't replicate. It wasn't luck. It was biology. Millions of years of evolution had made dogs exceptional at detecting hidden humans. No amount of engineering could improve on that. Daniel dropped to his knees and hugged Atlas, not caring how it looked. "Good boy," he whispered. "Such a good boy." The competition continued through the afternoon. There were more tests, more challenges. Atlas performed adequately in some, poorly in others. He couldn't match the raw processing power of engineered companions or the adaptability of energy constructs. But every time he succeeded at something, the mockery grew a little quieter. As the day wore on, something unexpected began to happen. Some students started paying closer attention to how Atlas worked, how he responded to Daniel's subtle cues, how his body language communicated clearly with his person without any technological interface, how he seemed to anticipate needs before they were spoken. A Lumen student near Rebecca leaned over and asked quietly, "Does the bond work both ways? Does the human understand the animal as well as the animal understands the human?" Rebecca smiled. "Watch them, really watch them. You'll see." On the arena floor, Daniel gave Atlas a hand signal. The dog immediately moved to his left side and sat, his attention focused entirely on Daniel's face. Another signal, and Atlas lay down. Another, and he moved to Daniel's right side. It was nothing impressive by technological standards, but the coordination was perfect. No verbal commands, no electronic interface, just two beings who understood each other completely. The final test of the day was scheduled for the next morning. Bond strength assessment, where companions and their partners would face various scenarios designed to test loyalty and cooperation. But as the day's competition ended, something else began to unfold. Maintenance drones near the top of the arena detected a problem. One of the power conduits that fed the holographic systems was overheating. Protocol required immediate shutdown for inspection. The arena coordinator announced a brief delay while technicians investigated. Students began filing out toward the exits. Daniel gathered Atlas's water bowl and supplies, ready to leave. Then he smelled it. Smoke. Faint, but unmistakable. Atlas smelled it too. The dog's entire demeanor changed. His ears flattened slightly. A low whine emerged from his throat. He pulled toward the source of the smell, his body tense. "What's wrong, boy?" Daniel asked. Before anyone could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the arena. Red warning lights flashed. The AI's voice cut through the noise with urgent efficiency. "Fire detected in Section 7 storage area. All personnel evacuate immediately. This is not a drill." Panic erupted instantly. Hundreds of students tried to reach the exits at once. The orderly crowd became a chaotic mass. Some species couldn't move quickly in the artificial gravity. Others had mobility limitations. The crush of bodies created a dangerous situation. Smoke began pouring through ventilation ducts. It wasn't thick yet, but it was spreading fast. The sprinkler systems activated, adding water to the confusion. Visibility dropped rapidly. Atlas had been pulling toward the smoke since before the alarms. Now he barked urgently, trying to tell Daniel something important. The dog's instincts, honed through thousands of years of living with humans, were screaming warnings. Daniel trusted those instincts. "Rebecca!" he shouted over the noise. "Follow Atlas." They moved against the flow of panicking students. Atlas led them along the wall, avoiding the worst of the crush. He seemed to know exactly where to go, his sense of smell guiding him through the smoke when eyes couldn't see clearly. They reached a side exit that most students had missed in their panic. Atlas barked at it urgently. Daniel pushed it open and found a clear corridor beyond, relatively smoke-free. He began directing other students toward the exit, his voice cutting through their fear. "This way. Clear path here. Follow the dog." Some students hesitated, seeming unsure about following an earth animal. But as the smoke grew thicker and the main exits became impassable, more and more began streaming through the door Atlas had found. Rethus emerged from the smoke, coughing. Stryker clung to his shoulder, the small raptor's enhanced systems overwhelmed by the environmental chaos. When Rethus saw Daniel and Atlas, his expression twisted with confused emotions. Gratitude, embarrassment, lingering pride fighting against obvious reality. "The exit," Daniel said, simply pointing. "Go." Rethus went, joining the flow of students escaping through the corridor. Security teams arrived, professional and efficient. They sealed off the fire and began organized evacuation. Within 20 minutes, everyone was clear of the danger zone. No serious injuries, no casualties. Outside the arena, students gathered in shaken groups. Many were discussing how quickly the situation had deteriorated, how Atlas had detected the fire before the alarms, how a simple dog had helped save lives while their advanced companions had been as confused and frightened as everyone else. Daniel sat on the ground, his clothes soaked from the sprinklers, his lungs burning slightly from smoke inhalation. Atlas pressed against him, calm now that the danger had passed. Rebecca sat nearby, watching the crowd with thoughtful eyes. "They're not laughing anymore," she said quietly. Daniel looked up. She was right. The students who passed by looked at Atlas with new expressions: curiosity, respect, uncertainty. The mockery had faded, replaced by something more complex. The companionship trials were postponed until the following week, while the arena underwent repairs. But Daniel suspected that when competition resumed, it would be different somehow. Something had shifted, something important. Atlas yawned, tired from the excitement, and rested his head on Daniel's lap. Just a dog, just a loyal companion doing what dogs had done for 30,000 years, protecting his person, sensing danger, helping where he could. Nothing engineered, nothing enhanced, just Atlas being Atlas. And somehow that was starting to be enough. 5 days after the fire, the companionship trials resumed in a different arena. The mood had changed. Students still competed with their advanced companions, but the casual mockery of Atlas had diminished. Some students even approached Daniel between tests to ask questions about dogs, about earth animals, about how the bond worked without technological interface. Rethus, however, maintained his distance. He competed with Stryker as fiercely as before, determined to prove his companion's superiority. But there was something different in his eyes when he looked at Atlas now. Something uncomfortable, like he was trying to solve a puzzle that didn't fit his understanding of the universe. The bond strength assessment was scheduled for late afternoon. This test measured how well companions and their partners worked together under pressure. Past trials had included obstacle courses requiring coordination, problem-solving scenarios needing communication, and endurance challenges testing mutual trust. This year, the judges decided to try something different. "We will simulate a rescue scenario," the AI coordinator announced. "Each companion must locate their partner, who will be hidden in a complex environment with multiple distractions and false trails. The companion must rely entirely on their bond, as no technological assistance will be permitted." Partners were led to sealed rooms throughout a specially designed maze. Companions would be released from a central starting point, with only their natural abilities and connection to guide them. Daniel entered his assigned room with mounting anxiety. This was the kind of test Atlas should excel at. Dogs had been finding their people for thousands of years, but the environment was designed to confuse. Ventilation systems would scatter scents, noise generators would mask sounds, holographic projections would create visual distractions. He sat in the small room and waited. Through a screen, he could see the central starting point where all the companions gathered. Stryker stood perfectly still, his enhanced brain already calculating probabilities. Arya's construct pulsed with contained energy. Vesper's drones hovered in precise formation. Atlas sat calmly among them, his brown eyes scanning the space around him. He looked small next to the engineered marvels. Ordinary. Simple. The test began. Stryker immediately started running through the maze in a calculated pattern, his enhanced senses attempting to filter through the distractions. Arya's construct split into multiple smaller forms, searching several paths simultaneously. The drones flew overhead trying to map the layout despite the interference. Atlas put his nose to the ground and started walking. Not running, not rushing, just moving with steady purpose. The distractions didn't seem to confuse him. The false trails didn't pull him away. He moved through the maze like he knew exactly where he was going. Daniel watched on the screen as Atlas turned corner after corner, occasionally pausing to confirm his direction, then continuing with renewed confidence. Other companions were still searching when Atlas reached Daniel's door and barked. The door opened automatically. Atlas rushed in and jumped up, putting his paws on Daniel's chest, his tail wagging so hard his entire body shook. Daniel hugged him tight, not caring that the judges were watching, not caring about the score. "How did you do that, boy?" Daniel whispered. "How did you find me so fast?" But he knew the answer. It wasn't enhanced intelligence or technological interface. It was something deeper, something that had developed over 30,000 years of humans and dogs living together, an understanding that went beyond logic. The judges marked their scores. Atlas had completed the test in less than 3 minutes. Stryker took 7 minutes, having followed several false trails before finding Rethus. Arya's construct took 5 minutes. Most other companions took longer. The crowd watching on displays throughout the station erupted in surprised chatter. Some students cheered. Others looked confused. A few seemed angry, as if Atlas's success somehow threatened their worldview. Rethus stood rigid as Stryker finally reached him, his face unreadable. When he emerged from the maze, he looked at Daniel with an expression that mixed respect and resentment in equal measure. "Lucky," he muttered. "Just lucky." But his voice lacked conviction. The competition continued through the evening. Final scores were calculated. Stryker won overall, his engineered capabilities giving him top marks in most technical categories. Arya's construct placed second. Vesper's drones took third. Atlas placed 7th out of 16. Not a victory, not even close, but far better than anyone had expected. More importantly, he had won the bond strength test. That simple fact seemed to mean more than all the technical achievements combined. As students filed out of the arena, Daniel overheard conversations that would have been impossible a week ago. "Did you see how quickly the Earth animal found its person? My companion is more intelligent, but I'm not sure we have that kind of connection. Maybe the humans understand something we've forgotten." Rebecca found Daniel outside the arena and hugged him. "You did it. You showed them." "Atlas did it," Daniel corrected. "I just trusted him." They walked back toward the residential buildings together, Atlas trotting contentedly between them. The station's artificial sunset was beginning, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Students passed by, and several nodded to Daniel with what looked like genuine respect. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He kept replaying the day's events in his mind. The competition, the scores, the way people had looked at Atlas differently. It felt like progress, like maybe the mockery was finally over. He was wrong. At 2:47 station time, alarms began screaming through the residential section. Not fire alarms this time, something worse. The station's AI cut through all communication channels with mechanical urgency. Emergency. Structural breach detected in Biodome Section 3. Explosive decompression imminent. All personnel evacuate affected areas immediately. Emergency bulkheads engaging, Daniel bolted upright. Section 3 was where many students had rooms, where laboratories and research facilities operated around the clock, where people lived and worked and studied. He pulled on clothes quickly and ran to the corridor. Other students were emerging from their rooms, confused and frightened. The alarms made it hard to think. Red emergency lights bathed everything in harsh shadows. Atlas was at Daniel's side instantly, his body tense, his ears alert. The dog sensed the danger even if he didn't understand it. "What happened?" Rebecca appeared from her room down the hall. "I don't know. Some kind of breach." They followed the flow of evacuating students toward the nearest shelter point. Security personnel directed traffic, their voices calm despite the crisis. Station defense protocols were designed for exactly this kind of emergency. Bulkheads would seal off the damaged section. Life support would maintain integrity in unaffected areas. Everyone should be safe, should be. They reached the shelter point, a reinforced section of the station designed to protect occupants during hull breaches or other catastrophic failures. Hundreds of students crowded into the space. The AI continued broadcasting updates. Breach contained. Affected section sealed. Damage assessment in progress. Remain in shelter areas until all clear signal is given. Daniel did a mental count of who he could see. Most of the students from his floor were there. Most, but not all. Has anyone seen Rethus? A Saurian student asked, her voice worried. No one had. Stryker's person was missing. A security officer was passing by and Daniel grabbed his arm. Rethus isn't here. He might still be in the affected section. The officer, a Saurian named Greth, who Daniel recognized from the registration desk, checked his datapad quickly. His expression darkened. Section 3, Corridor 7 was sealed automatically. 3 students were caught inside when the bulkheads closed. We're assembling a rescue team, but it will take time to cut through safely. How much time? 45 minutes minimum. How much air do they have? Greth hesitated. Maybe 30 minutes. Maybe less if they panic. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. 45 minutes to rescue students who had 30 minutes of air. The math was simple and terrible. Atlas had been sitting quietly at Daniel's feet, but suddenly he stood up. His entire body went rigid. He whined, a sound Daniel had heard only a handful of times. It meant something was very wrong. Daniel looked down at his dog. Atlas was staring at the corridor they had just evacuated from, his nose working the air. The whining continued, growing more urgent. What is it, boy? Atlas pulled toward the corridor so hard that Daniel had to brace himself. The dog wasn't just interested. He was desperate. Frantic in a way Daniel had never seen before. Then Daniel understood. The ventilation systems. The maintenance tunnels that ran through the station's infrastructure. The paths too small for most species, but possibly large enough for a dog. His heart started racing. It was a crazy idea. Dangerous, probably impossible. But it might be the only chance. Commander Greth, Daniel said, his voice cutting through the noise. The maintenance tunnels. Do any of them connect to the sealed section? Greth pulled up station schematics on his datapad. His clawed fingers moved rapidly across the screen. Yes, several, but they're too small for rescue personnel. Too unstable after the breach. We can't send anyone through them safely. What about Atlas? Greth looked at the dog, then back at Daniel. Understanding dawned in his reptilian eyes, followed immediately by doubt. You want to send an animal through unstable tunnels during an emergency? That's insane. It's also the only option that might work in time. The animal could get lost, trapped. The tunnels might collapse. You could lose your companion. Daniel knelt down and looked Atlas in the eyes. The dog was still pulling toward the corridor, still desperate to go. Dogs had been bred for thousands of years to help humans, to rescue, to protect. Atlas didn't understand the danger. He only understood that people needed help. Can we attach emergency oxygen to his harness? Daniel asked. And a beacon so we can track him? Greth was silent for a long moment. Other students had gathered around, listening. Rebecca stood nearby, her face pale with worry. In the crowd, Daniel spotted other human students. A Lumen who had asked questions about bonds after the fire. Even a few who had mocked Atlas during the first days of the semester. Everyone was waiting to see if a simple Earth dog could do what all their advanced technology couldn't. We can attach the equipment, Greth finally said. But I can't order you to do this. It's your companion. Your choice. Daniel looked at Atlas. Loyal, trusting, brave Atlas, who had been through so much mockery and dismissal, who had proven his worth again and again, who was now pulling toward danger because his instincts told him people needed help. We have to try, Daniel said. We have to at least try. Within 5 minutes, Atlas wore a specialized harness. 2 compact oxygen units were secured to his sides. A beacon was attached to his collar. Rebecca had tears streaming down her face as she helped secure the straps. Come back, she whispered to Atlas. Please come back. Daniel led Atlas to the entrance of a maintenance tunnel. The opening was barely large enough for the dog to squeeze through. Beyond it, darkness stretched away into the station's guts. Unstable metal, sharp edges, unknown dangers. Atlas, Daniel said, his voice shaking. Find them. Find Rethus. Find and help. Atlas looked at Daniel one more time. His tail wagged once. Then he disappeared into the tunnel. Daniel watched the beacon on Greth's datapad as a small dot moved through the schematic of the station's infrastructure. Moving deeper, moving toward the sealed section where 3 students were running out of air. All they could do now was wait, and hope that 30,000 years of human-dog partnership would be enough to save lives one more time. The maintenance tunnel was dark and narrow. Atlas squeezed through spaces that scraped his fur against rough metal. His paws found purchase on surfaces that humans had never meant to be walked on. The harness with its oxygen units bumped against the walls, creating small echoes that disappeared into the darkness ahead. Atlas didn't understand the station's emergency. He didn't know about hull breaches or decompression or the mathematics of oxygen supply. He understood only simple things. Daniel needed him to find someone. Someone was in trouble. That was enough. His nose worked constantly, sorting through the overwhelming mixture of scents that filled the tunnels. Coolant fluids, electrical insulation, metal. Dozens of different species who had passed through these spaces during maintenance, but underneath it all something else. The scent of fear, of people who needed help. He moved forward. Back in the shelter area, Daniel stared at the datapad in Commander Greth's hands. The beacon showed Atlas's position as a slowly moving dot on the station schematic. Every second felt like an hour. "He's moving deeper," Greth said quietly, navigating the junctions correctly. Somehow he knows which direction to go. Rebecca stood beside Daniel, her hand gripping his arm. Other students had gathered around, watching the screen. No one spoke. The only sounds were the distant alarms and the collective breathing of hundreds of beings. The dot that was Atlas reached a junction where 3 tunnels merged. On the schematic, 2 paths led nowhere useful. One led toward the sealed section. Atlas paused for several seconds. Then the dot moved forward, choosing the correct path. How is he doing that? A Chitari student asked, his mandibles clicking softly. "There are no markers in those tunnels. No signals to follow." "Scent," Daniel said. "He's following the scent of the trapped students. The ventilation system connects everything." "But the ventilation is damaged," another student protested. "The airflow is disrupted. How can he track anything through that?" Daniel shook his head. "I don't know. I just know that if anyone can do this, it's Atlas." In the sealed corridor, Rethis sat with his back against the wall, struggling to breathe. The air had grown thin. Each breath took effort. Beside him, 2 other students were in similar condition. A lumen named Sareth, whose energy form was dimming. A deep-born in an emergency suit whose water supply was contaminated with debris. Stryker clung to Rethis's shoulder, the small engineered Raptor's enhanced systems unable to help in this situation. His genetic improvements included intelligence, strength, sensory enhancements. But he couldn't create oxygen, couldn't cut through sealed bulkheads, couldn't save his person when it mattered most. Rethis looked at Stryker with fading awareness. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I should have gotten you out. Should have moved faster when the alarm started." Stryker made a soft chirping sound, pressing closer to Rethis's neck. The Raptor was afraid, but he stayed with his person. Loyalty existed even in engineered companions. The emergency lights cast everything in red shadows. Rethis's head felt light. His thoughts were becoming fuzzy at the edges. He thought about the companionship trials, about how certain he had been of his superiority, about Atlas, the simple Earth dog he had mocked so thoroughly. Would Atlas have saved him faster? Would an unmodified animal have been smarter than all their engineering? He would never know. The darkness was growing deeper. Then he heard it, a sound from the ventilation grate near the ceiling. Scratching, movement, something in the tunnels. Atlas emerged from the maintenance shaft covered in dust and small scratches. He dropped down into the corridor with a soft thud, landing on his feet like he had done it 1,000 times before. The oxygen units on his harness reflected the emergency lights. For a moment, Rethis thought he was hallucinating. This couldn't be real. The dog couldn't be here. But Atlas walked directly to him, lowered his head, and dropped a command trigger that had been placed in his mouth. The trigger was designed to activate the emergency oxygen release on the harness. Daniel had trained Atlas to carry it and drop it on command. Now, in the sealed corridor with 3 students dying from oxygen deprivation, the dog performed that training perfectly. Rethis took the trigger with shaking hands and pressed it. The oxygen units on Atlas's harness opened, releasing their contents into the corridor. It wasn't much. Maybe 5 minutes of breathable air. But 5 minutes was everything when you had seconds left. Rethus sucked in a desperate breath. The oxygen burned his lungs, but it cleared his head. Sareth's energy form brightened slightly. The deep-born student's suit system stabilized. Atlas sat down and waited, his tongue hanging out, his tail wagging slowly. He had done what his person asked. He had found them. He had helped. Now he would wait for whatever came next. In the shelter area, the beacon showed Atlas had reached the sealed section. The rescue teams, who had been cutting through the bulkhead with agonizing slowness, redoubled their efforts. They had a location now, a precise position. The beacon eliminated all guesswork. 15 more minutes, Commander Greth said. We can reach them in 15 minutes now that we know exactly where to cut. Will the oxygen last that long? Rebecca asked. With what the dog delivered, yes. Barely, but yes. Daniel felt his legs go weak. He sat down hard on the floor, his hands shaking. Atlas had done it. His simple, ordinary Earth dog had navigated unstable tunnels, found trapped students, and delivered life-saving oxygen. All the things the engineered companions and technological marvels couldn't do. In the sealed corridor, Rethus looked at Atlas with new eyes. The dog sat calmly, occasionally sniffing around the damaged space, but mostly just waiting near Rethus. When Rethus reached out a shaking hand, Atlas moved closer and let himself be petted. I was wrong about you, Rethus whispered. So wrong. I'm sorry. Atlas's tail wagged harder. He didn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. The person was feeling better. That was good. Stryker watched from Rethus's shoulder, his enhanced brain processing this new information. His person was alive because of the Earth animal. The dog had succeeded where Stryker's engineering had failed. It was a data point that didn't fit Stryker's understanding of the world. The sound of cutting tools grew louder. The rescue team was getting close. Sareth and the deep-born student had recovered enough to sit up to hope. They both stared at Atlas with expressions of wonder and gratitude. On my world, Sareth said softly, her voice like distant music, we create energy constructs through pure thought. We consider ourselves advanced, evolved, but I don't think any construct I could create would have done what this animal just did. The bulkhead finally gave way with a screech of tortured metal. Rescue personnel flooded in, bringing medical equipment and fresh oxygen. They stabilized the students quickly and professionally. Commander Greth entered last, taking in the scene with calm authority. He looked at Atlas, still sitting patiently in the middle of the chaos, and something like a smile crossed his reptilian features. Good dog, he said simply. The medical teams evacuated the 3 students on stretchers. They tried to take Atlas too, to check him for injuries, but he refused to leave without Daniel. He sat at the entrance to the corridor and whined, looking back the way he had come, clearly wanting to return to his person. Someone bring Daniel Reed here, Greth ordered. 5 minutes later, Daniel ran into the corridor and dropped to his knees beside Atlas. He checked the dog over frantically, his hands searching for injuries. Atlas was scratched and dusty, exhausted and thirsty, but essentially fine. He licked Daniel's face and pressed against him, content now that they were together again. You did it, Daniel whispered, his voice breaking. You saved them. You incredible, amazing, perfect dog. Atlas's tail wagged so hard his entire body shook. He didn't need to understand the words. He could feel the love and pride radiating from his person. That was all that mattered. The news spread through the station with incredible speed. Within an hour, every student at Celestial Academy knew what had happened. The simple Earth dog, mocked and dismissed, had saved 3 lives. Had navigated dangerous tunnels that no one else could pass through. Had delivered oxygen when all other options had failed. In the medical center, Rethus lay in a recovery bed with Stryker perched nearby. His scales had regained their healthy color. His breathing was normal. He was alive because of Atlas. When Daniel came to visit, Rethus struggled to find words. Pride and shame warred in his expression. Finally, he just said, "Okay, thank you. For what Atlas did, for what you taught us." "I didn't teach anyone anything," Daniel replied. "Atlas was just being Atlas. Dogs have been helping humans for 30,000 years. This was just one more time. But I didn't believe it mattered. I thought engineering and technology were superior to natural bonds." Rethus looked at Stryker, who chirped softly. "I love Stryker. He's remarkable. But he couldn't do what Atlas did. No amount of genetic enhancement could give him that kind of courage and loyalty." Daniel nodded slowly. Different companions have different strengths. Stryker is amazing at what he does. Atlas is amazing at what he does. Maybe the problem wasn't with either of them. Maybe the problem was thinking we had to compare them at all. Sarith, in the next bed over, spoke up. On my world, we abandoned natural life forms thousands of years ago. We thought energy constructs were more elegant, more evolved. Watching your dog today made me wonder what we lost when we made that choice. The deep-born student added, the bond between you and Atlas is something we can't replicate with technology. We can build loyalty into our companions, but yours grew naturally. That makes it different somehow. Stronger. Over the next few days, something fundamental shifted at Celestial Academy. Students began approaching Daniel not with mockery, but with genuine curiosity. They wanted to understand Earth's relationship with animals, why humans had chosen partnership over engineering, how the bonds worked without technological interface. Professor Kelvin organized a special seminar, and over 300 students attended. Daniel stood at the front with Atlas, feeling more nervous than he had during the companionship trials. I'm not a scientist, Daniel began. I can't explain the evolutionary biology or the psychology. I just know that dogs and humans grew together over thousands of years. They helped us hunt. We gave them food. They warned us of danger. We gave them shelter. Eventually it became more than survival. It became family. A student raised her hand. But family is inefficient. It requires emotional investment without guaranteed return. Maybe, Daniel agreed. But what Atlas did in those tunnels wasn't about efficiency. It was about loyalty, about love, about a bond that doesn't calculate cost versus benefit. He went into danger because I asked him to, because people needed help. That's what dogs do. That's what they've always done. Rebecca stood from the audience. I left my cat on Earth because I was afraid of exactly what happened at first. Afraid of mockery. Afraid of being seen as primitive. But watching Atlas these past weeks, I realize I made a mistake. The bond I have with Oliver is worth more than anyone's opinion. Next semester, he's coming here. Other human students nodded. The conversation expanded. Students from various species sharing stories about companions and bonds and the different ways love manifests across the galaxy. Rethus stood up last. His voice carried across the silent room. I owe everyone here an apology, especially Daniel and Atlas. I measured worth by the wrong standards. I confused advancement with superiority. I learned more from watching a simple dog save my life than I learned in all my years of study. The room erupted in applause. Not for Rethus's words alone, but for what they represented. A shift in understanding. An acknowledgement that the galaxy was big enough for many different approaches to companionship. That night, Daniel sat in his room with Atlas sprawled across his lap. The dog was finally clean after multiple baths to remove tunnel dust. His scratches were healing. He was content and safe and exactly where he belonged. You changed everything, Daniel told him softly. You showed them what really matters. Atlas yawned and licked Daniel's hand. He didn't need praise or recognition. He didn't need anyone to understand his worth. He had his person. His person was safe. The other people were safe. That was enough. Outside the window, stars turned in their endless dance. Somewhere out there, thousands of species lived their lives, each with their own ways of forming bonds and building relationships. Earth's way wasn't better or worse. It was just different. And different, Daniel now understood, was exactly what made the galaxy beautiful. 2 weeks after the rescue, Celestial Academy held a formal ceremony in the main assembly hall. Daniel stood nervously at the edge of the stage while thousands of students filled the vast space. Atlas sat beside him, wearing a new collar that Rebecca had made specially for the occasion. Commander Greth stepped to the podium, his reptilian features composed and serious. We gather today to honor an act of exceptional courage, an act that saved 3 lives when all conventional methods had failed. An act performed not by advanced technology or genetic engineering, but by a companion whose bond with his person transcends logic and calculation. The hall fell silent. Every eye turned toward the stage. Atlas, Greth continued. A canine from Earth navigated dangerous and unstable tunnels to reach students trapped in a sealed section. He delivered emergency oxygen that kept them alive until rescue teams could reach them. He did this without hesitation, without thought for his own safety, because his person asked him to help. Greth lifted a small medallion from a cushion beside the podium. The metal caught the lights, shimmering with engraved patterns. This is the companion star, established by the Galactic Education Council 50 years ago. It has never been awarded to a non-sentient being, until today. Daniel felt his throat tighten. He walked forward with Atlas, who stayed perfectly at his side despite the attention of thousands. Greth knelt down, which was remarkable for a Saurian commander, and fastened the medallion to Atlas's collar. For bravery beyond measure, for loyalty beyond question, for showing us all what true companionship means. Greth straightened and looked at Daniel. Your companion honors not only Earth, but all of us. The applause started slowly, then built like a wave. Students from every species stood and clapped. Some cheered. Others made sounds of respect in their native languages. The noise was overwhelming, but Atlas just sat calmly beside Daniel, his tail wagging. When the ceremony ended, students crowded around wanting to meet Atlas, to pet him, to understand him better. The dog, who had once been mocked as primitive and useless, was now the most popular being at the academy. Rethus approached through the crowd. He had been released from medical care days ago, fully recovered. Stryker rode on his shoulder as always. But something had changed in how Rethus carried himself. Less arrogance. More humility, Daniel. Rethus said formally. I owe you the apology I promised. I was wrong about Earth animals. About Atlas. About what truly matters in a companion. He paused, seeming to struggle with words. You tried to explain it during that first xenobiology class. About bonds forming naturally over thousands of years. About trust and love being more important than function. I dismissed it as sentiment. I was a fool. You weren't a fool, Daniel replied. You just measured things by different standards. We all did, perhaps. Rethus knelt down to Atlas's level. The dog watched him with calm brown eyes, showing no trace of resentment or fear. May I? Daniel nodded. Rethus reached out slowly and touched Atlas's head. The dog leaned into the contact, tail wagging. It was a simple gesture, but it meant everything. On my world, Rethus said softly, we pride ourselves on advancement. We look at the past as something to overcome, not something to learn from. Watching Atlas these past weeks, I wonder how much we lost when we engineered away the natural bonds our ancestors might have had. Stryker chirped from his shoulder, and Rethus smiled sadly. I love Stryker. He's brilliant and capable. But our bond was created in a laboratory, programmed into his genetics. Yours and Atlas's grew naturally. I'm starting to understand why that matters. Over the following weeks, the Academy transformed in subtle ways. More human students began bringing their pets from Earth. Cats, dogs, even a parrot named Winston, who learned to mimic 3 different alien languages. Other species began researching their own abandoned relationships with natural animals, wondering what their worlds had given up in the pursuit of technological advancement. Professor Kelvin expanded his xenobiology course to include an entire section on natural companionship bonds. Daniel and Atlas became regular guests, demonstrating training techniques and explaining the human-animal relationship. The classes were always packed, with students hanging on every word. But the biggest change came from an unexpected source. The Galactic Education Council announced a new initiative, inspired by events at Celestial Academy. They called it the Natural Bond Preservation Project. Its goal was to document and protect traditional companion relationships across all member species before they were lost to time and technology. Delegates came from dozens of worlds, sharing stories about animals their ancestors had lived with. A Lumen representative spoke about energy beings who had once bonded with crystalline life forms. A Chitauri historian presented evidence of ancient insect-plant symbiosis that went beyond simple farming. A deep-born elder remembered tales of his people swimming alongside massive sea creatures in partnerships now forgotten. Each story revealed the same truth. Natural bonds had existed everywhere, across every species, but in the rush to advance, to engineer, to optimize, most had been abandoned. Earth hadn't abandoned them. Humans had kept their animals, not because they were too primitive to move forward, but because they understood something worth keeping. 6 months after the rescue, Daniel received a message from Earth. His younger sister was applying to Celestial Academy, and she wanted to bring her golden retriever. Scout, she was nervous about the mockery she might face, about being judged for her choice. Daniel recorded a response immediately. Bring Scout, things are different here now. Atlas changed minds. But more importantly, Scout is your family. Never apologize for that. Never hide that. The bond you share is worth more than anyone's opinion. That evening, Daniel walked through the biodome with Atlas and Rebecca, who had indeed brought her cat Oliver. The orange tabby rode in a specialized carrier on Rebecca's back, watching the artificial sky with feline curiosity. "I've been thinking," Rebecca said as they walked, "about what makes humans special in the galaxy. We're not the strongest, not the smartest, not the most technologically advanced, but we're maybe the only species that kept our animals, that saw them as partners instead of resources to be improved. Do you think that makes us better?" Daniel asked. "No, just different. Every species has strengths. Ours is recognizing that some things don't need engineering, that some relationships are perfect, just as they naturally evolved." They reached a clearing where several other students had gathered with their companions. A Saurian student was carefully watching her newly acquired companion, a small lizard from her home world that her family had kept in their home for generations. A Lumen practiced forming energy bonds with a crystal-based life form, trying to recreate relationships her ancestors had abandoned. A Qatari student had even brought a colony of native insects, not as tools but as partners. Atlas played with a group of other dogs, their joy and energy infectious. They chased each other through the grass, wrestled playfully, and returned regularly to their people for affection and approval. It was simple, natural, beautiful in its lack of complexity. Rethis sat nearby with Stryker. The small raptor was watching the dogs with interest, his enhanced brain trying to understand their behavior patterns. Rethis had started researching his own world's history, looking for evidence of natural companions before the age of engineering. He had found fragments of stories about larger reptiles that once lived alongside his people. He was planning an expedition home to search for any survivors of those ancient relationships. "I used to think emotion was a weakness," Rethis said when Daniel sat beside him. "That logic and calculation were superior. But logic didn't save my life. Atlas did. And he did it because of emotion. Because of love and loyalty and a bond that doesn't make sense on paper." "It makes sense to the heart," Daniel replied. "Sometimes that's enough." The year continued, bringing new challenges and discoveries. Daniel's grades improved as his anxiety decreased, Atlas's calming presence helping him focus. The companionship trials were reformed, adding categories that measured emotional intelligence and natural bonding. The next competition looked completely different from the one Atlas had competed in. On the day of the new trials, Atlas didn't compete. He had proven his worth already. Instead, Daniel and Atlas sat in the stands, watching other companions demonstrate their unique abilities. Not in competition against each other, but in celebration of diversity. A Deepborn's aquatic companion navigated a complex water maze. A Lumen's crystal partner created beautiful light patterns. Stryker solved advanced mathematical problems. A human student's border collie herded a group of small robots with incredible precision. Each companion was remarkable in their own way. The judges scored not on superiority, but on the strength of the bond between companion and partner. On trust, on understanding, on the intangible connection that made each relationship special. At the end, there were no rankings, no first place, just recognition that every bond, engineered or natural, technological or biological, had value, that the galaxy was richer for its diversity. That evening, Daniel stood at his window watching the stars. Atlas lay on the bed, already asleep and snoring softly. His medallion caught the dim light, a reminder of the day he had changed everything. Rebecca's words echoed in Daniel's mind. What made humans special wasn't strength or intelligence. It was the ability to see value in relationships that couldn't be measured or optimized, to love something not for what it could do, but for what it was. 30,000 years ago, a wolf had approached a human campfire. Both species took a chance on each other. Over generations, they had become inseparable. Dogs and humans, partners through the rise and fall of civilizations, through humanity's journey from caves to space stations. That partnership had been mocked by species who thought themselves more advanced. But in the end, it had taught the galaxy a lesson they had forgotten, that some things shouldn't be improved, that natural bonds formed through time and trust held a strength that no laboratory could create. Daniel's datapad chimed with a message. It was from the Galactic Education Council. They wanted to create a new program bringing animals from member worlds to the Academy, a living museum of natural companionship. They wanted Daniel and Atlas to help lead the initiative. He looked at his sleeping dog, at the simple creature who had changed so much by just being himself, by being loyal, by being brave, by loving without question or calculation. "What do you think, Atlas?" Daniel asked softly. "Want to help bring more animals here? Show the galaxy what they've been missing?" Atlas snored in response, completely content. Whatever his person decided was fine with him. As long as they were together, nothing else mattered. Daniel smiled and sent his acceptance to the council. Atlas had shown the galaxy that Earth animals weren't primitive relics. They were partners, family, friends. They were proof that sometimes the oldest relationships were the strongest, that evolution didn't always mean moving forward. Sometimes it meant holding on to what worked. The mockery had turned to respect. The dismissal had become curiosity. All because one loyal dog had done what 30,000 years of breeding had prepared him for, helping his person, protecting those in need, being exactly what a dog was meant to be. In the morning, Daniel would start planning the new program. He would contact Earth about bringing more animals. He would work with the Council on facilities and protocols. He would help the galaxy rediscover what humanity had never forgotten. But tonight, he simply sat with his dog and watched the stars. Two species who had found each other thousands of years ago, still together, still partners, still proof that the simplest bonds could be the strongest. Atlas woke briefly, climbed off the bed, and pressed his head against Daniel's leg. Daniel scratched behind the dog's ears, that perfect spot that always made Atlas's back leg kick. "Good boy," Daniel whispered. "Such a good boy." Atlas's tail wagged once. Then he returned to the bed and sleep, content in the knowledge that his person was safe, happy, and near. Somewhere in the vast academy, other species slept with their companions. Some engineered, some natural, some technological, some biological. Each unique, each valuable, each a testament to the countless ways that different beings could form bonds across the stars. The galaxy was learning, slowly, but learning. And it had taken a simple Earth dog to teach them. Atlas would have been proud if he had understood. But he didn't need to understand, he just needed to be Atlas. And that, as the galaxy was finally discovering, was enough. More than enough. Perfect.